Hello, good morning everybody. I am delighted to be here with all of you on this beautiful sunny Friday morning, and I have been told that a few days back it was snow in the city, and today when we came here by train we saw a beautiful sunny morning with lots of snow around. This is my first visit to St. Petersburg, and my family's also first visit, and we are really delighted, honored to be with all of you. And before I begin, I must thank the Institute for their kind hospitality and support. I bring warm wishes for all of you from India, which is on the other end of the spectrum, near the ocean. So thank you, and good to see all of you here. Today I am going to talk about an issue which is more specific to India. I am going to talk about human capital, history and heritage of rural India. Generally, when you hear about any country other than yours, you hear about it in the context of foreign policy, diplomacy, and so on. I thought that perhaps it's time to go beyond that and talk about the society about which we are talking. And Indian society is one of the kind in the world which remains largely rural society. Its large population still lives in rural India, in villages, unlike Russia or many other parts of the world. India has world's largest population, which is peasantry, which are involved in farming, and of course, as I hope most of you know, that India has world's largest population. We have overtaken China in number of people who live in that part of land. So it's difficult to know about a country without knowing its people. And I thought it would be perhaps interesting to talk about villages of India, rural India, what it means and what are its major features. In the presentation, I am going to talk about three major things. I will start by giving you an introduction of the economic and social aspects of Indian rural society. Then I will be talking about the heritage, the different kinds of products which rural India produces other than agriculture, and then I will be talking about some of the aspects related to different communities who are involved in this. Now, when we talk about human capital, generally it is understood in economic terms, which is about the income criteria of population, how do we divide the population in terms of income groups, or their level of ownership. Now, I would like to say that human capital need to be understood in economic as well as social terms. Both social and economic go together, they converge when we talk about human capital. It's difficult to actually create a distinction between the two. In case of rural India, human capital is made of two such categories. One is class as a category, as we all know, defined in economic terms. Sociologically, what defines rural India is the category of caste. Caste is basically a hierarchization of the society, and it has been a traditional practice in India which defines the social status of an individual by birth. In the traditional Indian texts, the caste system originates from what is called the Varna system, where the society was categorized in four different groups. The first group, if you look at, does it have a light? Does it have a focus light? Okay. So if you look at the second point, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudras. Brahmins were recognized as the first group who were considered to be beholders of knowledge. The second group, Kshatriya, were the warriors. The third group were Vaishya, who were entrepreneurs, business groups. And the fourth group is called Shudras. Other than these three groups, everybody else who was involved in any kind of economic activity, physical activity, was clubbed together in the category called Shudras. And in this hierarchy, the Brahmins were kept at the top and Shudras were considered at the bottom. Now, here, when we talk about caste, a famous Indian social scientist, a very prominent leader of India who played a major role in devising India's constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he said that the caste system is not actually a division of labor, but it's a division of laborers. Why he said that? Though the categorization may sound like a categorization based upon occupation or the profession, but in reality, when it became a birth-based classification, eventually it converted into rigid social blocks to which each of these caste groups belonged. And it was impossible for any of the group to go into any other category. And gradually it created a society of hierarchies based upon caste. But it was not merely a society based upon caste-based hierarchy or divisions. It was also a society which further resulted into class-based divisions. Now, primarily, as I said, that India is an agrarian society, rural society. Now, what kind of convergence took place between society and economy? If you look at this classification, on the left-hand side in the table, you have the class-based classification, and on the right-hand side, you have the caste-based classification. Now, in early 1950s and prior to that, some scholars made efforts to explain the nature of Indian society by converging these two categories. In farming practices, those who were involved in labor work, physical labor work in the farm, they were also considered as what is called the untouchable groups. And these groups in the Indian constitution were recognized as what is called the scheduled castes. The second category of farmers, which included small, medium and large farmers. That means there were four different kinds of farmers who were recognized based upon the ownership of land. Now in Russia it may sound a bit strange, But in case of India, when you say small farmers, it means those who hold less than 1 hectare of land. And less than 1 hectare of land is, I think, unimaginable for a Russian farmer. Because in Russia you have very large land holding, farmers who own generally 40 to 50 hectares of land, and then goes up to 5,000, 6,000 or 10,000 hectares. Now, what is further important here is that a majority of farmers in India, which means more than 60% farmers, fall in the category of small and marginal farmers. When we talk about large farmers, which means those who own more than 6 to 10 hectares of land, they constitute 1% of the total farming population. Now, if you look at this categorization, the small farmer group consists of the other caste category within Shudras, which are called in the constitution backward castes. The small farmer and landless agricultural laborers, together they constitute together they belong to the backward castes and the scheduled castes. The marginal farmers largely belong to the other backward castes. Now, if you look at the remaining farmer category, which means the large and medium, which means those who own either 5 hectares of land or maybe more than 10 hectares of land, they all fall in the category of either upper castes or the backward castes. Now, the upper castes, when I am saying, it basically means the Brahmins and Kshatriyas or Vaishyas who were involved either in knowledge production or who were the warrior communities or who were the entrepreneur classes. So a larger chunk of land holding belonged to the groups which were at the top of the rural social hierarchy. Whereas a larger population who were involved in physical labor, who were involved in working in farms as cultivators, they were part of the bottom of the rural social hierarchical system. Now, it may sound that when I am talking about rural social hierarchy, it belongs only to rural India. No, it's not the case. It continues to remain, this division continues to exist even in the cities or in the urban areas. The only difference is that the boundaries are not so rigid as they are in the rural areas, they become blurred in case of cities. Now, in other words, when I am talking about rural India, I am talking about social and economic aspects of this India, which means more than 60% of population. One major group which I have mentioned, two major groups which I have mentioned, the forest dwelling groups and pastoralists, they were recognized in the constitution as a separate category called scheduled tribes. And finally, group of artisans who were involved in production of handicrafts and other forms of handloom, they belonged to the backward castes, or many of them also belong to the Muslim community. Now, before I talk about some of these pictures, I wanted to show you this map. This map actually shows different art forms, different kinds of handicrafts, handlooms and other forms which exist in India. And if you look at the map carefully, you will see it is all filled up from top to bottom and from left to right. These art forms are basically the forms of art, forms of knowledge which were produced in villages in rural India by the marginalized population, which is more than half of the rural population. It included different art forms, starting from printing on the clothes, paintings, or pottery and various other forms. Now, generally when we talk about India and we talk about these products and so on, we don't really know who are the people who are producing these products. The only thing which we know is that India produces some of these finest products. But it is also necessary to know those people who contribute to this knowledge. And in reality, these groups are those who are at the bottom of rural social hierarchy. Now, let me just give you a glimpse of these. These are some of the photographs which we clicked before coming here. And Professor Nikulin had asked me to talk about heritage of rural India. And as I had shown you the map, I found it really challenging what to include and what not to include. Because if I can roughly say, there are more than 10,000 forms of art which exist in rural India. So it's actually impossible to give a glimpse of these different forms of arts. In that scenario, I thought, let's choose some and then talk about it. So in Delhi, we have a place called Delhi Haat. Haat is basically a small market, informal kind of market. And because it's in the capital city of Delhi, so it is called Delhi Haat, where different artisans from different parts of India are allowed to come display their products and sell them. So we thought Delhi Haat basically shows you a mini India in itself. The mini rural India, India of artisans and crafts, traditional knowledge systems and so on. So this photograph is about different kinds of carpets which are produced in eastern India and central India. And a majority of those who produce these carpets, they belong either to the bottom of rural social hierarchy called scheduled castes or the Muslim artisans. The next picture, if you can see at the bottom of the floor, the person is selling drums. And drums here is made of two things. One is wood and second is leather. These are produced in eastern part of India and it's again in central part of India. There are two communities involved in this production. One, those who work with wood, and second, those who work with leather. Now, together, they produce different kinds of musical instruments which are found in rural India. Now, why it is necessary to talk about it? Because if you think of musical instruments, let us say in Russia or in parts of Europe, generally you would think of the modern instruments which are produced by different companies and which are sold in the cities. But we hardly know about the traditional instruments which were produced and who were the people who were behind this production. And remember, these are not the people who use these instruments. They are not the one who play these instruments, and yet they produce. I'll come back to this. Now here, this is a form of art of embroidery, which is again produced in central India, western India and south India. And if you look at these clothes, the clothes are handloom, handmade clothes, and the embroidery is also done by villagers themselves. These clothes are the kind of coloring, the dye which is used is produced by the villagers, artists themselves. And if you see, there are different kinds of clothing you will see. So some parts of this is produced in central India, some are produced in northern Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir and in state of Uttar Pradesh. Here if you see these paintings, you can check it on internet also. If you look at the Madhubani paintings of Bihar, eastern India, in Delhi Haat you will see women sitting and making these paintings quickly. And it's amazing to see this kind of complex painting, the way they come up with these paintings maybe in a day or two. And they can print they can make these prints even on a piece of cloth if you tell them to do so. And they are such fine artists, those who do it in such a quick manner, that it is impossible to assume that how could one do it with such a finesse. Now, moving beyond the artisans, in 1960s, India started a new experiment in cooperative building, which basically was about cooperative of dairies, milk production. And I don't know how many of you are familiar that India is the second largest producer of milk in the world. The other fact also is that we are the largest consumer of the milk as well. So, milk is a major commodity in India. But in the process of milk production, livestock production, there are different rural communities which are involved, which includes the backward castes and which also includes the pastoralists. So the woolen products which you get from India, please remember that these wool products are coming from different communities who are involved in sheep breeding, who are involved in preparing the wool and then selling it to the market, where further this wool is used. And these pastoralist groups are found in parts of Western India, parts of Southern India. If you look at the title called Amul, Amul is basically a brand of milk in India, which is one of the largest cooperatives in the world. And Amul transformed the lives of millions of women who were involved in milk production in western state of Gujarat. And it was after this cooperative that India became one of the largest milk producers with the largest dairy industry in the world. And we are still expanding. This experiment involved different communities and groups in rural India who were involved in, as I said, in livestock management and production. I did get a picture of this experiment. It is called Kudumshri, which is a cooperative in southern state of Kerala. And this particular cooperative involved millions of women who were involved in producing different goods, starting from, let's say, soap, honey, and other kinds of products. And after Amul, it is one of the largest cooperatives which produces these items. Now, Kudumshri later on also converted into providing microfinance to women, and it also got involved into cooperative banking in rural India. I would just like to mention that Kerala is one state of India which is considered even ahead of many European countries in its Human Development Index. So when you think of India, it's actually a complex. It's usually, when one talks about India, it figures that it's only about poverty and backwardness, which is true in some areas, but there are other areas which have been doing extremely well in different indicators. And I would like to say, being the students of an institute which works on issues of banking, finance, economics and so on, that it is necessary to keep these diversities of people in mind when we study these issues. Without looking at the social diversities, it is impossible to work on a finance system which caters to the requirements of a society. No economic understanding can be complete without understanding the society in which it operates. So, the Kudumshri and Amul were just the two examples which I have shown you. Now, all these experiments and this was going on till late 1990s and 2000. After that, one major challenge which India started facing is the problem of monocropping. I'm sure those who know about Russian economy, they know about monocropping very well, because Russia is also one of the agricultural economies which falls into the category of monocropping. The two major crops which India produces are wheat and rice. And gradually it was realized that wheat and rice, especially rice, was a water consuming crop and which was impacting the groundwater level of India and also impacting the environment in a negative way. And one of the efforts which the government started taking was to encourage the diversity of crops. Though so far it has not been quite successful in doing that. But one experiment which the government started focusing since last 15 years was to bring in food diversity in the plate of every Indian. And this diversity, the effort was to bring back a traditional crop called millets. So, this was the menu which I was trying to show you. It's a millets menu which shows that how the traditional food items which are considered nutritious and which can be grown with less water and even in simple rain-fed conditions, they are being encouraged so that the problem of monocropping can be solved. The millets are basically now, just to inform you, that this year is also declared the International Millet Year by the FAO. Government of India has also declared the year 2023 as the Millet Year. And FAO in its findings has highlighted that millets can contribute in reducing carbon emissions in major way because, and if I am not wrong, there are some millets, I think ragi, which was part of the Russian diet once upon a time, which gradually disappeared. A time when wheat was quite expensive in Russia because of various external reasons, one of the major local crop which was used was a millet. So millets can be one major crop which could actually contribute in mitigating the impact of climate change. Now, in this whole story, there is one more factor which I would like to share. This picture yesterday, when I was speaking to the students in Cologne, the students were really fascinated by this photograph and they asked what this shows. And this is quite a contrast from the Russian conditions. This is the photograph of Dr. Ambedkar, about whom I was talking in the beginning of this presentation. He said, caste is not only a division of labor but also of laborers. Now this is the entry of a village, where the title at the top, it basically talks about two things. It talks about the youth and the ancient Indian emperor called Ashoka the Great. So it was basically about mobilizing the youth and demanding social economic equality in the rural areas. India's villages are politically extremely active spaces. They are not politically disconnect or dull spaces. The youth or the older generation in rural areas plays a very active role in Indian politics. And if you look at the social and economic categorization that I talked in the beginning, and if you go to this slide, who are the people who play an active part in this politics? They are the people who are at the margins of rural society. So those who are actually at the margins, they are beholders of the traditional art forms. They are the ones who are involved in physical hard labor, and those who are the ones who are actually the defenders of democracy in India. So rural India is actually a complex which is full of history, heritage, knowledge, politics, and of course inequalities and exclusion. Now, why do I want to share this with all of you? Is just to show you that when we study social sciences, when we study economic sciences, please remember, no study of economics can give us a complete understanding without looking at the social context. So human capital involves the society and economy both. Economic relations cannot be seen separated from the social relations. The manifestation of these social relations can be different. In case of India, it is caste. Maybe in other societies, it could be language, ethnicity, skin color, or religion. It could be something else. But we need to figure out what is that. So, my humble submission to all of us is that we need to figure in the social diversity when we are talking about economics, the class-based understanding of human capital. And as the history of your institute also shows, that this institute has contributed greatly to this understanding in Russia. I look forward to more fruitful engagement and cooperation with your institute and my own institute in India, which actually works on these different aspects of political economy. I would like to thank once again all of you for your patience and paying attention. Many thanks to the organizers. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Если у аудитории вопросы и если questions. So questions.
Okay, sir, I didn't catch if there are any subcultures in rural India, rural areas of India.
Subcultures, you said?
Subcultures that doesn't concern religion.
That doesn't concern?
That doesn't concern religion. Yeah, I asked maybe. Yeah, may I ask? May I ask if there are any subcultures in India, rural areas of India that doesn't concern religion? That's the question.
Просто если кто-то не услышал вопрос, я переведу, хорошо, чтобы было всем понятно. Девушка задала вопрос о том, существуют ли в сельской местности, в сельских поселениях в Индии какие-то субкультуры, которые не связаны с религией. Поэтому попросим сейчас внимательно послушать ответ.
So thank you, sir, please, you're welcome to answer.
So, should we take the questions first and then I answer, or how do you want me to do it?
Please answer, then probably some.
She just translated.
Okay. So, that's a very interesting question. Because when you say religion, in India, the meaning of religion is very different. So, we have different groups which have their own different value systems and which may not actually fall in the category of how do you understand as a religion. So there is no one deity, there is no one book, there is no one organization which governs that particular group and its faith. So the subcultures in India, they do concern religion, I would say, but they have religion as a category, it is difficult to say. Instead, what concerns largely most of the subcultures is the caste system. So every group or the group of followers who belong to certain norms who follow, they do belong to one caste group or the other. So in fact, in Indian politics, we have a strong scholarship which says that the only category which challenges the category of religion in India is the category of caste. Though in the past, few decades, this has been changing, and there are efforts to bring one religion as a category of the religion of the land called India. But I think, looking at the diversity and complexity of Indian society, it is not possible to have one religion. It's a land which belongs to what we call multiple faiths, not religion. I hope I answered your question.
Есть еще вопросы? We have a question from our YouTube chat. I can read it. Dear Mr. Professor, how do you assess the perspective of securing of differences in competences and lifestyle between urban and rural populations due to development of digital technologies?
So, can you say it again?
How do you assess the perspective of disappearing of differences in competences and lifestyle between urban and rural populations due to development of digital technologies?
Yes, the one major development which has been taking place since last 3 decades is the increasing interaction between rural and the urban areas. And one intermediary category that has emerged in this process is of small towns as well, what in Russia perhaps you call as suburbs. Now, this has actually increased a greater interaction between rural population and the urban population, and it is also said that the rural population is getting urbanized gradually. But I must also say that the reverse is also happening. Urban population is also getting ruralized in some ways. So the caste differences and other forms of exclusion which existed in rural areas are also gradually reaching to the urban areas. The digital technology has played a major role in this change because there is a new youth which tries to take advantage of digital technologies by starting what we call as the startups. They are new entrepreneurs in New India. But this new economic culture, whether this has really transformed the society, that's a question which is yet to be answered. Because looking at the kind of differences which still exist in India, especially caste-related differences, which are now even culminating into religion-based differences, I think this economic change has not really bridged the gap between the two. In fact, this gap is being further enhanced. And the middle farmers which I was talking, they are the groups who are either moving to the small towns or they are into different kinds of violent activities, criminal activities and so on because of increasing rate of depression. The marginalized sections, which I talked in the beginning, especially the scheduled castes, they look at this process of rural-urban change as actually an empowering process. Because it breaks the rural hierarchy, it opens up new avenues for them, and it actually provides them a sense of mobility. So they start in the morning, they go to cities, they work as plumbers, electricians, security guards and so on. They get some wages and salary, they come back and they also work in farms. So this diversification of income that has happened in rural areas, it has actually been an empowering process for the scheduled castes. But this entire process of economic empowerment has not really resulted into the desirable social change, which I think continues to remain a challenge.
Thank you so much. Есть еще вопросы?
Thank you. Hello, From YouTube and TikTok, we know that in rural India, there are a large number of smart people who are experimenting with electricity and mechanism. Do you know that such geniuses live in our villages too? So could you tell us how the state supports the initiatives of young scientists living far from large cities?
If I understood you correctly, you are asking that how the state support is playing a role. Is that what you are asking?
Yes.
Yes, the state in India, especially in 1950s, started working hard for achieving social equality as well as economic equality by different programs. And India at that time tried to cooperate with former Soviet Union and tried to establish what are called the collective farms. From China, we tried to learn more about cooperatives. From the United States, we tried to learn about what is called the community development programs. So there was an effort to achieve some kind of balanced development. But in 1960s, it resulted into a focus which was more on agricultural production. And the social aspect was actually compromised. Now the state focus till the late 1990s was more on economic aspect of development of agriculture sector. So increasing focus on technological development, state support for technology and adoption of these technologies, it continues even till late, but it was only in the late 1990s that the state support started diversifying itself and started supporting, for example, infrastructure development and so on. In 2009-10, the Indian state adopted a very ambitious and wonderful program called National Rural Employment Guarantee Program, through which it started giving employment to the farmers and the laborers who were otherwise unemployed for various reasons. Now this is one of the biggest state intervention by the Indian state since independence. However, the infrastructure development and state support continues to remain insufficient. I think that is one area where we still need to work hard by ensuring that the technology reaches to everyone in the villages and infrastructure is available for everyone. I think I answered what you wanted to ask.
Yeah, thank you. How can you provide some ways to cooperate in these technologies of between our countries?
It continues to remain a challenge. Of course, the government is using technology as one of the major interventions. But I think what is further required is a more dedicated focus on rural development program, which is still missing. And such a dedicated program requires a more focused, what is nowadays called a mission mode to develop rural areas, which includes not only fulfilling the minimal requirements, but also providing a more quality life in rural areas.
Thank you.
So I think we have to finish for today. Thank you so much for a very interesting lecture. Надеюсь, что всем было полезно, интересно.